Are God of the Gaps and Science of the Gaps equivalent ideas? No, and here's why. So what is God of the Gaps? God of the Gaps is the idea that when we have something that we don't know, that we don't understand, especially like a scientific idea or something about how the world works, we insert God in there as an explanation. And this is most obvious with like the ancient pantheons where they had naturalistic gods, Zeus hurling lightning bolts, Poseidon being blamed for storms at sea, volcano gods, this sort of thing. None of these, obviously, none of these has ever borne itself out to be true. We have repeatedly found naturalistic scientific explanations for all these phenomena, and the gods have essentially been rendered unnecessary. It's hard to say philosophically that a naturalistic explanation proves that Zeus doesn't exist. I mean, theoretically, Zeus could be manipulating the electrons to make the lightning happen, but you can see why in modern thought that's a bit of a stretch. I think it's fair to say that they've rendered those ideas null. So in modern context, you often see this, especially with cosmogony, with origins discussions. We have this question about why the universe is the way it is in some certain way, and people will tend to insert God in there as an explanation. Now, what is science of the gaps? This is a pejorative term, in my opinion, that's bandied about by creationists and other theists, and saying that naturalists are making the same sort of excuse that, oh, we don't know how this thing works, but we know that science will figure it out eventually. And they're saying that people are trying to exclude God as an explanation in there by placing science in there instead. There's a couple of problems with this. First of all, future possible discoveries aren't being used as explanations for the phenomena. We're not saying, oh, science knows what it is, or science will know what it is, so we don't have to figure it out. It's saying that, well, we may eventually get to the answer. Whereas in the God of the Gaps kind of argument, God is being posited as the explanation for what's going on. Also, for what it's worth, science has a track record of actually explaining phenomena, and religion doesn't. I mean, wherever a religious explanation, whatever God has been inserted, it eventually has been pushed out by science, wherever we found the actual answer to that. I mean, there are some of these things that are still unknowns, but we have a long track record of science actually coming up with answers and displacing religious answers. It overts, it eliminates the God of the Gap. It displaces the God of the Gap and replaces it with actual naturalistic explanations. Also, I don't think this is generally being used as a way to necessarily dismiss God of the Gap's ideas. Oh, I think that can be done. I mean, if someone says, no, your argument is null because science may explain it eventually, that would be a fallacy. That would sort of be a science of the gaps fallacy, I think. You see this, actually, a good comparison for this would be evolution, the evolution discussion. Some people think that if they disprove evolution, if they show evolution isn't true, that means that God is more likely to be true. But the problem is, even if you completely disproved evolution, that doesn't prove your God hypothesis. That doesn't make God real because you've thrown out evolution. Likewise, just because you potentially have a naturalistic explanation for something, that doesn't mean you can dismiss a logical argument for God. The argument itself needs to be considered on its own merits, and competing ideas don't necessarily add or detract from that. Anyway, that's my thought. I don't think these are equivalent ideas at all, although I suppose the science of the gaps can potentially be used in a fallacious way, but it's still not essentially the same because it's never positing an actual explanation. It's saying that we may come to an explanation at some point. So there it is. Anyway, Thanks for watching this quick little video. I hope you are all well. As always, be kind to one another and subscribe. Like if you like. Don't like if you don't like. That's fine. I don't judge. And I'll see you next time.